Like a lot of people, I got into TTRPGs through Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the things that I thought was great about it are the many pre-published adventures you can run. But finding a group as an adult is, well, let's just say I started playing solo RPGs instead. But I kept wondering, is it possible to run a published module by yourself without spoiling everything? Turns out it is. And I found 4 different methods people use, each with its own strengths and limitations. Some of them work better or worse, depending on what you enjoy in solo play. Today, I'll break down all 4 methods so you can pick the one that fits your style of play and get to experience a published adventure without waiting for a group.
One of the biggest problems when playing a published adventure is dealing with spoilers. How do we keep the information that we shouldn't know to a minimum, or at least don't let it influence the way we make decisions when playing?
Let's assume you enter a room in a dungeon that has a secret door. To resolve the room and move the story along, you need to read the text explaining the contents of the room. But now you know the secret door is there, and you have to decide if you let your character look for it. Personally, I think that's hard to answer now that we have the so-called meta-knowledge. First, we have to accept that it is impossible to avoid all spoilers. But we can put a few rules in place that limit their impact on our decision making. This character sheet allows you to select 3 actions as a default behavior and define some additional habits for your character. These predefined actions are something your character always does, regardless of the contents of the room. This takes a lot of the pressure out because if it isn't a default behavior, you don't get to do it retroactively. These actions can of course be subject to change. Even if your character usually doesn't search for traps, after encountering 1 or 2 they probably should. But just relying on this can make it feel a bit repetitive, and it won't really let you interact with the specific contents of a room. So let's say you're about to enter the next room of a dungeon. If your default behavior doesn't cover it, or you want to do something else, you make a binding decision on how to approach the room. Then you can read the description and make another binding decision on what you are going to do in that room. For example, trying to identify the mysterious object in the middle. Lastly, you read the detailed room description and resolve whatever is happening there based on your decisions and your default behavior. Binding decisions are decisions you make for short-term behavior that can override or supplement your default behavior. Keep in mind though that these decisions you make can change and should change according to the situation. You really shouldn't let yourself be stuck in a nonsense action because of them. And while these things are solid tips, it can make the adventure feel a little bit flat. Luckily, there's a rather simple solution. Whenever you read the box describing a situation, you roll a d6 and try to imagine one of your senses being engaged. This should come after your first binding decision and before you read the detailed description of the location. By actively involving your senses, you can pull yourself into the situation, improving your immersion. Everything I've described just now here comes from a book called DM Yourself, which also includes tips on how to read a published module, tips on difficulty adjustments, flashbacks, and much more advice that I personally found really useful.
But maybe you want something with even less spoilers. And wouldn't it be cool if there was a published adventure that was made for solo play?
Gamebooks are basically pre-written solo adventures, so why not use them? There are many options available, and I personally tried the first 2 adventures from the Dungeon Masters Guild, and I was pleasantly surprised. They come with these handy maps allowing you to really get a feel for the situation, and they use some really cool methods to keep it interesting. Additionally, we can use some of the techniques we learned from Method 1 and try to define certain habits and default behaviors for our characters. It's definitely not the same as running a campaign or having the complete freedom you get when playing in a group. But you get a published adventure that requires no prep, no spoilers, and no GM.
So far we've talked about minimizing spoilers or avoiding them completely. But what if there was a method where knowing these spoilers didn't matter at all? Most solo players use an emulator to replace the game master. But what if we turned this whole script around and emulated our player character instead?
There are a surprising amount of player emulators out there. The player emulator with tags tries to emulate the real-world players at the table by giving them an agenda, a focus, and rolling up a new live event every session that influences how they play. The OOO player emulator comes with some spark tables and a really cool idea of defining something obvious, odd, and opposite to randomly decide what your character does. Or you can use my method. I defined certain traits for my character and put them on a spectrum from 1 to 9. I start at 5, then roll 2d4 to move the trait up and down to determine it randomly or, choose. The numbers of my traits correspond with the odds on the one-page Mythic GM emulator, which I then use to determine how likely my expected behavior is. But let me show you an example. In the Dragon of Icespire Peak starter adventure, my character visits Gnomengard and sees the pathway leading up to the caves. Since he is cautious, my expectation was that he would walk up that pathway. It was very likely because my trait was at 7. I then asked Mythic if that is what he does. I rolled a no, and instead the character climbed up the wall. I made the appropriate check, and I adjusted the trait because I succeeded in doing something reckless. If I had rolled doubles, that would have triggered a random event, and I would have rolled on either these tables or the character action table in the original GM emulator. My idea here was that I could use this method for character development. Because if a character is relatively reckless and keeps running into traps, at some point they would probably change their approach. And if a character is cautious and does something reckless and succeeds, how does that impact future decisions? I personally feel like this is a good and highly customizable approach to represent this mechanically. Player emulation might not be the typical approach for solo role-playing, but it gives structure and randomness without the need to hide spoilers.
Playing a published adventure is something I really wanted to try, and I definitely got some cool tools for my solo RPG arsenal. But overall, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. It wasn't the emergent storytelling that I enjoy when playing in a solo RPG. But that's where method number 4 comes in. Wouldn't it be cool if we could combine the emergent storytelling with the cool aspects of a published adventure?
For this method, we will be reading through our whole adventure and compile a so-called adventure script. We will extract locations, encounters, NPCs, factions, and all the other relevant stuff our character knows and doesn't know and put them on a list. Then we play a regular game using the Mythic Game Master emulator, and whenever we get a random event or an interrupt, we use the filled out form as inspiration. You take the best parts of a published module, shuffle them like a deck of cards, and play a completely unique and new adventure. That is definitely a lot of work up front, but you get emergent storytelling inside a published module. If you want a more detailed explanation, I will link you to a blog post regarding this topic that you can check out for yourself. I personally haven't tried it yet, and I don't really know if it's for me, but I imagine it could work rather well with a more sandbox-style adventure. Let me know in the comments if you want me to take a closer look at this style of play. In the meantime, you now have some tools you can use to play a published adventure, but we also need to make sure you keep playing. In this video right here, I discuss 5 methods to keep your solo RPG from burning out. See you next time.